lordships and ladyships, for we are going on a search for one of the world's most greatest, iconic literary characters, Miss Havisham. And this is where the search begins. Who was this Miss Havisham? Well, she is still one of the literary world's most iconic characters ever created, and also a mystery of where the idea of her character came from. And where would we find this Miss Havisham character? But here, in the novel, Great Expectations, written by Charles Dickens in 1860. But first, let me introduce you to Miss Havisham herself. Dear viewer, may I present Miss Havisham. Our literary character, Miss Havisham, is a wealthy woman in her 50s who mainly lived alone in the living room of this crumbling old mansion. The man she is about to marry is a dashing young man called Compeyson. An interesting and curious name, I think. Anyway, as you can see, Miss Havisham does not look too happy. Why not? Well, on the morning of her wedding, as Miss Havisham was putting the wedding dress on, she receives a letter from her fiancé, Compeyson, saying he was not coming, as he was leaving her. Miss Havisham is in shock, and angry too. But why, you ask? Well, dear viewer, you will have to read the book. Mystery, as she had inherited a brewery, and Compeyson could have had a good life with her. So what did she do? Not what you think. First, she stopped every clock at the time she received the letter from Compeyson.
20
to 9. Secondly, she decides never to take off her wedding dress. And thirdly, she vows never to leave that table until her suitor should turn up. But that is not all. Miss Havisham had adopted a beautiful young woman named Estelle. Such was the need for revenge felt by Miss Havisham that she sought to create a monster of love. Oh, but there was someone who suffered more than usual from Estelle's ice queen ways. That was Pip here. In fact, Pip is the main character of the book, Great Expectations. Anyway, what happened after her fiancé Compeyson did not appear? Miss Havisham waited and waited. In fact, for years she waited. Hence all this dust and all this cobwebs. Horrible this, your lordships and ladyships. Simply horrible. Look, I could go on, but spoiler alert, I wouldn't want to give the ending away. But I can honestly say, if you think any modern-day TV soap is twisted, well, this is positively toxic, vengeful, and twisted. Seems nothing's changed, in other words, except Charles Dickens, in a sense, may have been the creator of the modern-day TV soap. So where to from here? I won't give any clues as to what happened next, but I highly recommend this book, Great Expectations. I assure you it will take you into the deep sides of human nature. But where would Charles Dickens get the idea of such a great character? To understand that, you have to understand what Charles Dickens' own family background was like. Let me show you something. Charles Dickens' beginnings were no bed of roses. He grew up the only son of impoverished parents in conditions like you see here. There was no social security, and Charles was forced to sleep rough outside and work in workhouses for the poor. That is where he got many of his colourful and desperate characters that he used later in his magazines and in his famous novels. Charles's intelligence and feisty nature soon got him noticed by a local publishing business, and Charles was on his way. The rest is history. Now, when did Miss Havisham first appear? Dickens was writing the hugely popular Pickwick Papers, sort of what we would call soap dramas, but with either truly offensive or hugely lovable characters. About this time, Charles decided to write a novel, Great Expectations he would call it, and a literary star character was born. In 1870, Charles Dickens died, and after that, the first questions were asked about where he got this Miss Havisham character. We do know that Charles Dickens based Miss Havisham on a real woman, and apparently not just one woman either. My lordships and ladyships, I think we now need to take a little trip or two to see where these women lived. Firstly, we need to travel to the West Midlands of England, which is near Wales, to see where our suspect number one lived. She was a woman Charles Dickens met when visiting the town of Newport in Shropshire. Let's see why she might have been the inspiration for Miss Havisham. It is documented Dickens encountered a wealthy recluse here called Elizabeth Parker, on whom it is widely believed he based the character while staying in Newport, Shropshire, also at the significantly named Havisham Court. But now we have to go and find suspect number two. America, here we come. I am here in Harlem, New York City, where Madame Jumel, an American friend of Charles Dickens, lived. One of his visits to see her, she proudly showed him the cobweb banquet room where she had not touched since holding a dinner some time before for Joseph Bonaparte, the older brother of Napoleon Bonaparte. And just to doubly indicate her being the real Miss Havisham, Madame Jumel had in fact adopted her young niece, a lovely young woman, a mirror image of Estelle in Great Expectations. This does seem to be the strongest lead so far. Could she have been the original Miss Havisham then? However, we have not finished with our suspect. I think we shall now go to Australia. We are here in the inner city suburb of Newtown, Sydney, and it was here that Elizabeth Donnithorne lived, and who possibly has the strongest resemblance to Charles Dickens' literary star character, Miss Havisham. Elizabeth Donnithorne lived alone here in a mansion, and she was engaged to her fiancé. However, she was jilted by him on her wedding day, and she spent the rest of her life alone in this darkened house, her wedding cake lying untouched on the table, with her neighbours also claiming she kept the front door permanently ajar so she could see him if he was ever to return. So, dear viewers, Elizabeth Donnithorne does seem to have many of the characteristics of Miss Havisham. But how did Charles Dickens know about Elizabeth Donnithorne if he never visited Australia? Two of Charles Dickens' sons lived here, sending information when they could. But really, which of our suspects could have been the original Miss Havisham? Time to get back on that plane again. Well, here I am, back in England, in London, where Charles Dickens lived, grew up, and became a successful writer. Then later creating one of the world's most iconic literary characters, Miss Havisham. But really, again, where did she come from? Which one of our suspects is the real Miss Havisham? Elizabeth Parker? Madame Jumel? Elizabeth Donnithorne? I can only say that I feel no closer to understand where the real Miss Havisham came from. But of course, it's obvious. She was a combination of all three. Like all of you viewers have probably thought too. Still, not a definite answer to that question of where Miss Havisham's character originated. Aha! Perhaps there is indeed one last person who will know the definite origins of the character. Let's hope. Let's hope. Let's hope. Let's hope. Oh, thank goodness you're still here. Pardon me, of course you are here. Miss Havisham, I need to ask you a question. Do you know who the real Miss Havisham was? Miss Havisham? You don't want to talk to me? Of course. Well, in that case, if you don't mind, I will sit down, and I might stay a while, if you don't mind. If you don't mind. Until you would like to talk to me. I think I know where the real Miss Havisham came from. The real world.